Markle has the worst judgment of anyone in the entire world. Meghan Markle is flawless at getting it all wrong. All of her ideas are total crap. Prince Harry is a lamb to the slaughter who just sort of blindly followed her like a child. These withering remarks are all direct quotes, and surely the most devastating charges the Duke and Duchess of Netflix will ever have levelled against them. So, who is responsible for this wounding volley of stunningly derogatory put-downs? Step forward none other than respected editor and royal author Tina Brown, a close friend of Harry's late great mother, Princess Diana. It's not often that I'll concede I couldn't have put it better myself, but here goes. I couldn't have put it better myself. With her harsh but undeniably accurate assessment of a couple who promised so much but achieved so little, straight-talking Tina has hit the nail punishingly on the head. Everything their Montecito Majesties have done has gone wrong. Even Megxit, their undignified dash for so-called freedom, was horribly mishandled, suddenly quitting Britain, sloping off to Canada like a pair of furtive fugitives on the run, and turning what should have been a manageable drama into a major crisis. Former Vanity Fair Supremo Brown, whose royal books, the Diana Chronicles and the Palace Papers Inside the House of Windsor, The Truth and the Turmoil, were instant bestsellers. Also dismissed Harry as a very impetuous man who courtiers always thought would reject the straitjacket of royalty. And she condemned his post-royal life as a disaster all round. It's hard to argue with any of Miss Brown's observations, and it feeds into what I've always said all along, that the oft-stated view that Meghan is dazzlingly brilliant and poor Harry is as dim as a broken light bulb is as unfair as it is untrue. Sure, it's only too painfully obvious that the less-than-academic prince is no Einstein, but here's the deal. Nor is Meghan. Seems to me the former game show hostess isn't much brighter than her thick husband. And therein lies the problem. She's not very clever, but she sure as hell calls the shots. And he does what he's told. Sadly, events have proved that, as Tina Brown so eruditely declared, all of Meghan's ideas are indeed total crap. The massive multi-million-dollar deals she and Harry sealed with Spotify and Netflix were impressive. But Meg's pathetically poor podcast series Archetypes was a nauseatingly worthy crime against entertainment. So tedious it hurt. Hence, Spotify cancelled their $20 million contract PDQ, with one boss calling the Duke and Duchess shameless effing grifters. And as for the $100 million the Sussexes got from Netflix, after they'd finished insulting the royal family, calling them racists, and accusing bemused Brits of feasting on the evil profits of slavery, their creative reserves ran hopelessly dry. And since then, it's been downhill all the way. No one cares about Harry's upcoming horse programme that in December will treat Netflix viewers to everything they never wanted to know about Chinless Wonders sport polo. And the streaming giant's bosses are so excited about Meghan's cooking show, they haven't even scheduled it. And don't get me started on the Duchess's alleged money-making machine lifestyle site, American Riviera Orchard. Why should I start when it hasn't? Launched in a blaze of publicity 8 months ago and now mired in a mess of legal wrangling, it still isn't open for business. So if you're looking for an overpriced beige towel, you're out of luck. Meanwhile, the book they bought the film rights to remains just a book. As their decline and fall into an empty kind of nothingness continues apace, the dismal duo are delivering a textbook lesson in how to get it all flawlessly wrong. Relentlessly on and on their failure goes. Where they're heading, nobody knows.
I mean, King and his trip to Australia, I would say, went pretty well. I mean, aside from that numpty who interrupted his visit to Canberra at one point, claiming that they wanted, you know, baby's bones back or some rubbish. For him, I imagine it was quite a successful trip, wasn't it?
I think without question. Physically, he survived in the sense that, you know, battling cancer and managed, the whole thing was managed to make sure that he could cope physically with the demands, bearing in mind it's the other side of the world where if they went to Australia and Samoa, there was a lot going on, the Commonwealth heads of state. So I think all in all, he negotiated his way around it very well. And I assume you feel like in Australia now, the sort of Republican movement is a bit on hold now. It's not going to be at the top of the agenda. Australia seemed to have more pressing things to sort out rather than the heads of state, but he was warmly received there. And then through the Commonwealth state, obviously there's a lot of sort of political stuff going on behind the scenes, and obviously the talk of reparations and everything, which again, he successfully sort of avoided sort of saying too much. And in it, all in all, I think he can be mighty pleased with the trip that he's just gone on.
Right, and he's apparently planning more overseas tours coming up soon. I mean, what's all that about? Do you think does that suggest that his cancer treatment is going to stop soon?
I think he's just felt frustrated that he hasn't been able to do these trips since the cancer diagnosis at the start of the year. He wants to be an active king, going on visits, because he feels that's very part and parcel of his role, representing Britain on the global stage. And the soft politics of the monarchy is extremely important. And that's what I think he wants to be able to do. And this proving that he sort of managed to deal with it and the health issues and get through it, then I think that means that there's a much more positive outlook in terms of planning further foreign visits.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of an unsavoury story to ask you about, so I apologise in advance for this. But this is a senior advisor to Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who apparently said this. He's a guy by the name of Ben Judah, Labour advisor. He's described as Lammy's brain, which can't be a good thing to be, really. I mean, you know, it can be many things to David Lammy, but you don't want to be his brain, do you? He apparently said that people would perhaps not mourn the death of Prince William. There have been tears for the Queen, but can we imagine the same for Prince William decades from now? Looking at him, I can't shake the feeling that he's just a West Londoner, is the quote.
Well, yes. Obviously, David Lammy does attract a fair amount of criticism and at times, and indeed, this advisor for certainly his what appear to be anti-monarchy sentiments, and obviously one of the things that might be a case of the defence for the advisor is that no one will match the sort of love and affection of the late Queen, and I think perhaps he has a point there, but in real terms it's not a particularly good look and sort of slightly disrespectful. And particularly if he's the advisor to the Foreign Secretary, as we were just alluding to, David, obviously important part representing Britain overseas, as the monarchy does. And if the team are seen to be slightly anti-monarchy in sentiment, that's not a particularly good look if you're going around with somebody who's representing the country and you're not actually enamoured with the institution that the monarchy represents.
Should we pay reparations for our role as the United Kingdom in slavery? That's a big question that has been on the lips of many, especially Caribbean leaders, at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which has been in Samoa this week. Kier Starmer has been there. The head of the Commonwealth is, of course, the King, King Charles. And he has said, none of us can change the past, but we can commit with all our hearts and learning its lessons and to finding creative ways to right inequalities that endure. And he said it was important to understand and acknowledge the most painful aspects of our past, but he also made clear it was crucial to look to the future and right ongoing inequalities through education, skills, training, employment, health and addressing climate change, which has also always been something that King Charles has been interested in for many, many years. Well, Duncan Larkham is the former royal editor of The Sun. Duncan, is this just pretty on brand for Charles, and do you think he supports or doesn't support the idea of reparations? Because I've read both. People have taken different things out of these remarks, but perhaps that's the point. The point is that King Charles has to, has many different audiences, and he has to stay on the right side of them.
Yeah, good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon.
Real minefield. His first speech as head of the Commonwealth, and to delegates that many of whom will be hoping that there's some sort of hint from him that reparations might be paid. But I think you have to remember that King Charles's hands are very much tied by this. He has to follow government policy. He has to take his briefings from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and they will have had a very careful look at his speech before he delivered it. So, there's no way King Charles, can go off-piste and just start promising things, willy-nilly. That would be a real constitutional issue for him with the government.
Tell us the views of some of the other nations and sort of the nature of the Commonwealth. You covered it, of course, as royal editor of The Sun, because how much do the views of nations that are perhaps not uppermost in our minds, but how much did that certainly come into the mind of the Queen and now King Charles as they fulfil the role of being not just King of England, King of the United Kingdom, but also head of the Commonwealth?
Yes, I mean, the Queen famously was absolutely committed to her role as head of the Commonwealth. It meant a great deal to her. And she always, throughout her reign, continued the work of her father in sort of playing that figurehead role and trying to encourage the nations and the entity of the Commonwealth to continue. It looks like King Charles has picked up where his mother's left off. But I mean, there are differing levels of enthusiasm for it. Some people criticise the Commonwealth and say, what's the point of it? I mean, there's even talk of perhaps wrapping up the Commonwealth Games and not bothering with those anymore. So it's perhaps an institution that has its critics, and those who ask, well, what's it really? Is it really relevant anymore?
What do you think, Duncan? Is it relevant? Are there lessons we can learn from the Commonwealth?
Well, I think it's a fabulous concept that we as Commonwealth countries, part of the former British Empire, keep very close ties for trade. I mean, post-Brexit, of course, there was a lot of hope that perhaps the Commonwealth countries would fill the gap, if you like, with trading with Europe and provide new opportunities that weren't open to us when we were in the EU. So, I mean, I think the Commonwealth is a great idea. And it does make up an awful lot of the work of the royal family. Their royal tours every year, including the likes of Prince William and Catherine, their royal overseas tours are almost always to Commonwealth countries. And as we saw in Australia, by and large, they get a very, very warm reception wherever they go.
The countdown is on. How to knock out rumors of a strained relationship 101. Be photographed together, yakking it up. It is the obvious next step for Harry and Meghan after headlines like this one. Ruthless Meghan Markle set to give henpecked husband Harry the chop after she butchered ties with dad and royal family before axing her closest friends. It's quite the mouthful.
Talk finally about Prince William, though, because apparently he's involved in a new documentary about his mother, Princess Diana, and he pays tribute to her, obviously, in that, but he also actually names his brother, Harry, which he hasn't done for a few years.
Well, it's all about this homeless documentary that is coming out on ITV, and the role that the Princess Diana played in drawing attention to it, making the two boys, William and Harry, understand that there are people very much less fortunate than they are, and making sure they understand what they need to this issue. Yeah. And homelessness is a big project for Prince William. We know it's important to him. He wants to try and see some benefits and some improvements. There are projects being conducted throughout the country. So it is very much it's a big PR exercise for Prince William and his role. And he always says, I must do things that have a sense of purpose. I don't just want to be somebody who opens up a building here and there's a plaque or something. What he actually wants to do is see some material benefit. And this homeless project is something that he's putting a lot of work into to try and solve or ease the problem. It's never going to go away, sadly, but at least you can see with William that he wants to try and make a bit of an impact and help people who are much, much less fortunate than him and give them a leg up. Very much like the Princess Trust, now the King's Trust that Prince Charles set up all those years ago, has helped lots of people through getting up the working ladder, as it were, and very much the same with this homeless project for the Prince of Wales.
I mean, where are they heading, Samara? God knows. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, they're not doing anything. Everything they've done has failed. And, you know, in those few sentences, Tina Brown, you know, a respected author, former editor of Vanity Fair, has nailed it. They're a disaster, these two. Everything they've done has failed. And as she quite rightly says, Meghan's ideas are just seriously crap, aren't they?
The wedding was a failure. She was accused of being, from the onset, she was accused of being a bridezilla. She bullied Kensington Palace people. She invited celebrities that she had never met before, like George Clooney, over family members like her father and her sister.
That's true.
She had a crack at being a royal. That lasted less than a year. She left everyone upset, and the Queen especially, when she left the royal family. They famously only gave the Queen about half an hour to process the news when they did so. She messed that up. Her 40 times 40 initiative that she did on her 40th, on her 40th birthday. Everyone who was involved in that, all those poor women that wanted another start at work life, they actually haven't been contacted by Archewell in years. The page hasn't been updated since 2021 when it was launched. Archewell, 20 employees and over have walked out the door, majority of those being women. Majority of those being women. She's not exactly the supporter of women that she claims to be. The interview with Oprah, that over 30 lies and mistakes in it. The podcast she launched with Spotify, obviously, dropped after one season. And then obviously jam. There's no jam. There's no jam at all. Unless she's fermenting it or it's some bloody bottle of wine. I don't know what's going on there. So that's just a couple of failures.
Simon, do you fancy going down to the pub? I don't think we need to be.
Sorry.
No, absolutely brilliant. Here's the thing, Simon. The most interesting of those put-downs from Tina Brown, I thought, was all of her ideas are total crap.
Yeah.
She's a lamb to the... he's a lamb to the slaughter, but she's a lamb to the slaughter in the punishingly commercial world of Hollywood. You have to have better ideas than, let's talk to women about stereotypes. Worthy and boring. You have to have better ideas than buying the rights to a rather dreary middle-class book called Meet Me at the Lake. You have to do better than this. She doesn't really know what she's doing. Harry, we can excuse for having no commercial sense whatsoever. He doesn't come from the commercial world. She ought to know better, but she just doesn't. So what I was saying, and I stand by it, we know he's dim, very dim, but so's she.
Yeah, look, as an entrepreneur, and that's what she's trying to be, entrepreneurs famously try a lot of ideas and a lot of them don't work. I mean, that's...
But it goes a bit wrong when all of them don't work.
Can you name one idea that's worked out for her?
Well, I would say...
One success.
I would say that Suits has worked out for her.
That's not her idea.
I would have said that...
That's just a two-bit actress landing a role in a cable series.
I would say as well...
You can't... she's an OK actress. She was in an OK series. That's not down to her. What about her ideas?
OK, so being an actress is what I mean. Being an actress has worked out for her. Why doesn't she go back to doing that?
OK, yeah, agreed.
Okay, I would say that. That's what I mean. But I would also say as well that Tina Brown, highly respected woman, highly respected journalist and editor. But, you know, you go and sort of look at places that she's worked. She was described once by one of...
We're going to slag Tina off, are we?
Not under my watch.
Quite a good career, I think.
Not under my watch.
We're not going to slag her off. I'm just going to say it is very easy to cherry pick from people and sort of say she's described famously as Stalin in high heels. What was Meghan described as the other day? Tina Brown's been called Stalin in high heels.
Well,
Tina Brown also got into, metaphorically, got into bed with the Weinstein brothers.
Let's not attack Tina Brown.
The Weinstein brothers.
Look,
let me finish this. Let me make this point.
This is a shit way of
with the Weinstein brothers
this debate.
and set up a book publishing company. Why, as a journalist, did she not spot the signs about Harvey Weinstein? That's just all I'm going to say about that. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I don't
It's very easy.
Yeah, but don't undermine Tina Brown. She's had an amazing career.
I'm not
She's
undermining her.
more to the bloody point. she's very close to the royal family. She knows the royals. She was very close friends with Princess Diana, Harry's mother. It's very pertinent and very relevant that she has chosen to
Okay,
say
so I
this.
just want to go back to the point that you made then. Entrepreneurs, when you try something, when you try to be entrepreneurial, many of your ideas won't work.
I agree with that.
Many of your ideas won't work.
Really frame herself as an
None of her
entrepreneur.
ideas work.
At the moment, she's not being very lucky. Let's say that.
Lucky, not being very lucky. You make your own luck, mate.
No, you
and,
don't. No,
she
you
doesn't.
don't. Look. I mean, look. Trump Airlines, Trump Beverages.
Oh, stop it!
Trump University,
Stop
Trump
it!
Cigars, Trump Meat.
Oh my God!
When you're
Call
an
for the men in
entrepreneur-
wine coats.
when you're
Trump
an-
derangement syndrome.
away.
Serious case.
When you're an entrepreneur, not all your ideas work. That's all I'm saying. I'm making that point.
Yeah, no, and a very good point it is too. However, you know, as an entrepreneur, you do need some of your ideas to work, or even maybe just one.
It's interesting, Kier Starmer has downplayed the prominence of reparations. He says none of the discussions have been about money. He had faced a lot of pressure from leaders of Caribbean nations who want the UK to consider paying reparations for the impact of the transatlantic slave trade. I wonder I mean, you've got to separate. It's a weird one with the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, isn't it? Because you have Kier Starmer there as being the head of government. You have King Charles there being the head of state, who's also the head of the Commonwealth. So that's a very difficult dance, both politically and for the King and previously the Queen to actually navigate, isn't it?
Well, it is. And of course, you know, although King Charles holds the power and those titles, the reality is his hands are completely tied. I mean, as soon as he wanted to make some sort of political promise that contradicted Kier Starmer's government, there would be a constitutional crisis. I mean, it could, and some might even say it could sort of prompt the end of the royal family as we know it, because the Republicans would seize on this as political interference by a non-elected person who
we do seem. Sorry to interrupt you, Duncan, but I wonder what your perspective on this is actually in terms of Charles the man being less political these days. Does he kind of get it now that he is, not that he didn't necessarily get it before, but when he was Prince Charles, things were different. His role was different, and perhaps he could be a little bit more open in terms of his political views, or perhaps not political is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, political, current affairs views with a sort of small p political side to them. Do you think, is it the effect of maybe age, or is it the position himself that maybe he's mellowed, or maybe he just sort of says, right, I see what my mother did, you know, very few people, there are very few issues on which we really knew what her views on really anything politically, that's the model I want to follow?
Yes, I think there are signs for that, and I think that speech to Chobham was a sort of indication of that sort of balancing act that he's playing, saying things which are very on message and in accordance to government policy. As Prince of Wales, it was his trademark to interfere a little bit. I mean, he was accused of that. Remember the spider letters that he'd sent to government ministers expressing his views on all sorts of different issues.
Yes, and on the big freedom of information battles that were there for journalists like yourself trying to get access to how he was trying to influence government.
Absolutely, and he was criticised for that. But now, as king, I think we have seen, you know, we're over 2 years of him on the throne, and so far, I don't think there's been anyone that's sort of come out and said he's being political. He does seem to have passed that on to his son, William, I think, on issues like the environment. It's William that's leading with the Earthshot Prize and is really trying to keep the momentum going on environmental issues. King Charles is much more now of a sort of figurehead, and of course, let's face it, he had since the age of 4 years old to prepare for this job, so it's no surprise perhaps that he's getting it right.
Friends of the royal family admit the extended family members who were invited to Sandringham last year, like Prince Andrew and Fergie, are waiting to see how the king's health holds up in the coming months before making their holiday plans. However, Rupert, the Express reported over the weekend that King Charles and Queen Camilla will resume a full schedule of royal tours next year. A senior palace official has said that the king genuinely loved the 9-day tour of Australia and thrived on the busy program of engagements. They added that it has lifted his spirits, his mood, and his recovery. In that sense, the tour, despite its demands, has been the perfect tonic. quite like your beverage in your hand. So does that make you lean in the direction of a classic royal Christmas? You know, do you think that we probably will see, I mean, I guess you've already answered that question. To me, it doesn't sound like much has changed. We're hearing that the king's doing great. He's planning for the future.
I think it's very important what he did in Australia and Samoa. And as you say, lifted his spirits, because because he's not someone who likes to sit down much. And his wife has had to, at times probably put a restraining order on him. So it's not easy. But I think it would have been good for him. He loves Australia. And he does really get his role as head of the Commonwealth. And so for him to be able to do a normal visit, okay, probably a very managed timetable, appreciative of his recovery. And remember, it's the other side of the world, gets their 28-hour flight or something, back from Samoa, back to the UK. So it's not easy. But I think the king wants to be out and about. He hates just sitting back. Okay, he might be having the odd meeting. He wants to go out and meet people. That's what he thrives on. And I think it has to be seen as a positive influence, that the doctors obviously were there to manage and make sure he was all right. But there seemed to be no indication that he flagged throughout. And it was quite a demanding visit, particularly the Samoan one with the heads of Commonwealth. There was a lot going on there, sort of the soft politics of the king and all the issues about reparations. And there's a lot of backstory around that. But actually to see the king out and about, I think that's an encouraging sign for all and sundry that he's going to try and get back to business as usual. Bearing in mind, he is 75 or 76. He's not a young man. So even if you are recovering from cancer, you're still physically going to be finding it tougher work than if you were, say, in his 50s. But he's now got a chance to do his kingly duties as he would see fit under as normal circumstances as possible. And that means being on the road, because in many ways the country needs him, because the soft politics of the royal family is one of the key elements of the reason we have a royal family, because it cuts through. There's no political agenda, but what goes on back behind the scenes is the important bit of the royal family. When they go on state visits, they bring a entourage that is able to do the soft politics of being the head of being a part of the royal family and Britain on the global stage.
But how they justify their Harry chopping block angle is this way. Hugo says, I hate to say it, but her form is that she dumped her father. She dumped her first husband. She dumped her Canadian chef lover. She dumped Jessica Mulroney. She then dumped the entire British royal family. So who's going to be next for the chop? I think inevitably, probably Prince Harry, and there will come a time when she will think that she doesn't need him. Radar claims that their sources fear for Prince Harry's future, worried he could also become victim to Meghan's infamous tell-all interview strategy if he ends up being divorced by the Duchess. Hugo adds, she will probably somehow put him in the wrong so that she can say that she's a wronged woman and he's just behaved like the others. I don't think she ever admits that she is wrong about anything, but I feel very sorry for Prince Harry because I think he's in a very difficult place at the moment. I think he has been for some time. I don't think that her projects have done Harry any good. Oh, you mean the tell-all chat show or memoir? Sorry. I'm actually getting my couples mixed up here. I mean the tell-all docuseries and the memoir. In a separate Radar Online article, they quote a source as saying, this hasn't been a good year for them. Everything they touch has gone wrong, and it's reached boiling point. That press she got about being a dictator in heels and yelling at florists would have been the last straw for anyone. But what's put things in perspective for Harry this last year has been all the health shocks coming out of the palace almost overnight. His and Meghan's concerns seemed frivolous and irrational. I don't think it's a coincidence that getting his inheritance has given him the courage to really step up. And you can see how happy he is. It's like the old Prince Harry is back. The smile's reaching his eyes for the first time in years. The outlet also claims that multiple sources have referred to Harry as a henpecked husband. I'd never heard that phrase before. But when I looked it up, it said continually criticized and given orders by one's wife or female partner. Example, his father, a henpecked husband, is petrified to raise a voice. Kind of savage. What do you think next steps should be or could be for the Sussex PR machine? Will we see a staged paparazzi photo soon, or should we be suspicious that two people that love to correct the narrative have gone completely silent? Could Meghan be waiting to spring the truth on us after she finds a way to monetize it like Jada Pinkett Smith did? So there was a lot of speculation surrounding Prince Harry deciding to spend a couple of more days in Africa. And of course, like all of the whispers right now are the fact that we're seeing Harry and Meghan pursuing things solo. And of course, that's generating conversations around the status of their relationship, but that really intensified when we found out that Prince Harry decided to spend a few extra days in Africa after he had done this, whatever you would call it, mini faux royal tour by himself that a lot of people deemed quite successful. My question to you is, could Prince Harry be recording the Africa documentary that we heard he was allegedly producing for Netflix under the radar? They've become so secretive that I wonder if that is why he might have been spending a couple of days in Africa without Meghan.
It is possible, Kinsey. I mean, I've heard that he's supposed to be doing this Africa documentary, and it's got all the ideal aspects of being the right opportunity for him to do something like that. We have known for some time that they have traveled occasionally with a Netflix film crew to various places, including the UK. So it is possible. I think we'll just have to wait and see if it actually comes off. I mean, they need a new project. I mean, they've done enough as it is. They spent most of their time just criticizing the royal family, with their various Netflix programs. They need new topics now. They need new topics that are interesting. Now we have a lot of documentaries in this country about the royal family, various aspects. Diana, the Queen, all sorts of stuff that happens on a Saturday night, usually on what we have here, Channel 5. It seems to be the place for these sort of documentaries. Now, if Harry is doing a documentary, I'm sure, and it's not a moaning mini documentary, it's an actual positive scenario, then I'm sure it should do quite well, if in fact that's what he's been doing.
Yeah, I think I wanted to make sure I circled back to this topic because when investigating or kind of collecting information about the African Parks charity scandal, I thought to myself and probably said out loud, well, no wonder that African documentary died, that there was all this buzz about. And even our mutual friend from last week or the week before, Tessa Dunlop, told me that one of her friends who is a female director was approached about that documentary, the African documentary for Netflix. So I wondered if they had to put it aside because of the African Park scandal. Would a documentary on Africa jeopardize his relationship there because everybody would bring it up? But the idea that potentially he's there in Africa, I always want to admit when I'm wrong. So if he is there, I admit that I'm wrong in saying that perhaps they had to put that aside because of the African Park scandal. I'm with you. I'd love some positive content.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. The African Park scandal was a problem. I mean, it hit the newspapers here, but I have to say, in the great scheme of things, in terms of royal matters, it didn't engender that much controversy here about it. But I'm sure he was consulted about the problems with that situation. And I still think, if he's doing the Africa thing, best of luck to him. I just hope it comes over as something positive. I think, I'm like you. I have criticized Harry in the past and both of them in the past. But if he's doing something positive that will help his charity, Senta Bali, in Africa, at the end of the day. Well, then that's fantastic. You know, I'm all for him doing those sort of things. And we've seen him when he's been doing his charity stuff, even when he was here with Well Child and all these sort of projects that he does. He looks happy. You know, it's back to the old Harry. He's got a smile on his face. And I'm not trying to say that that's because he's not with Meghan, or I'm trying to avoid all that sort of scenario at the moment. But, you know, I think they've both decided that they've got to go their separate ways. And I'm not talking about the marriage breaking up or anything like that. I'm talking about business-like. You know, they've got to concentrate on what they want to do to make money, which I don't have any problems with them making money. Is, you know, when they're just doing controversial topics like criticizing the royal family, it just gets a bit tedious. But if he's going to do these sort of documentaries, then best of luck to him. And and if it comes off, I look forward to seeing it.